Meteorologist David Burgett here. We just finished the Atlantic hurricane season on Thursday, and I'm here to break down what we saw for this activity for this past season, and I'm here to break down and give you more information about hurricanes in general. So starting off first, we need some ingredients for hurricanes to form. We need sea surface temperatures above 80 degrees Fahrenheit. If the sea surface temperatures of the ocean waters in the Gulf and Atlantic are not above 80 degrees, we will not have enough energy for these storms to form. We also need low vertical wind shear, which is changing of the wind direction with height. The Coriolis force, which is a natural force that arises from the rotation of the Earth. When you stand on the equator, objects will be deflected to the right. This really gives us the counterclockwise motion, or helps give a counterclockwise motion to all low pressure systems and hurricanes in the northern hemisphere. We're also going to need high relative humidity. That's going to add potentially more moisture into the atmosphere, making it more unstable, allowing for these storms to grow and to form in the Atlantic and in the Gulf. So comparing for what we saw this year, the National Hurricane Center released their original outlook back in 2023 here in May for this season, and they were predicting the higher end from a range they gave: 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. And if we compare this to our 30-year average for this what we saw this season, we saw about 20 named storms, 6 above the 30-year average, but we're right on par there with the number of hurricanes we saw and major hurricanes. So we also, for this year, we ranked 4th for the most named storms within a year. And even though that sounds like a lot, there was only 2 that really made landfall in the United States. One was a tropical storm, and that was Ophelia, and the other one was Hurricane Idalia. And we went through a lot of the names on this list, not to mention that we did see an unnamed storm in January, so conditions were favorable even before the hurricane season started to get some Atlantic activity going on there. But we went through a lot of these names this year. We only left off Vince and Whitney. So we went through about 20 of these named storms, or 19, at least 19 names on this list so far. And the one that really did make more impacts and when it made landfall was Idalia. Taking a closer look at this hurricane right now, it really went through rapid intensification really when it went into the Gulf of Mexico here on the early mornings of August 29th, and it rapidly intensified with warmer waters and low vertical wind shear as it made its way all the way up into the Florida Panhandle area. So right around 2 a.m. on August 30th, kind of right before it made landfall, a few hours before, it was seeing winds at 120 miles per hour, but it continued to rapidly intensify and strengthen about 3 hours before landfall at a Category 4 with winds at 130 miles per hour. But before it made landfall in Keaton Beach, Florida, around near 8 in the morning, 7:45, it kind of started to dissipate at about 125-mile-an-hour winds, making it a Category 3. Now, it might not seem like a lot, but with that wind speed difference, it could be a potential for another category up, which might create more devastating impacts along the Florida Panhandle here. And now you might be wondering, well, why did it really start to dissipate through those right before it made landfall, at least? Well, it went through something known as an eye replacement cycle. And really what happens with the eye replacement cycle, this is from Hurricane Ian in 2022. This hurricane actually made landfall about 200 to 300 miles south where Keaton Beach is for this year. And what happens with this eye wall replacement cycle is that the inner eye gets eroded away by an outer eye here, and that really starts to form and take precedent over that. So this is from Hurricane Ian as it was in the Gulf, making its way up into the Florida Panhandle also about a year ago before Idalia hit. So you kind of see this rotation here in these darker clouds here on our infrared radar kind of take shape and start to form a new eye wall around the old eye wall, and you see a greater eye wall that forms towards the end of it right before it made landfall there. So you might be wondering, why is this happening? Well, there's some theories about it. Scientists are still discovering this and researching this. It could be all about convection and wind speed. So one of the theories is that the diameter of the old eye will be too small. This means that convection cannot stay organized for long enough, and the new eye wall forms outside the old eye wall with newer convection on the outside, or greater convection. And we also are going to see outside winds, as another theory, become too strong. And really what that means is it's going to break down the inner eye wall and kind of erode it away because the wind speeds are higher on the outside as that new eye wall starts to form. And then we also, for our last theory here about why this might happen, the eye wall replacement, is that there's going to be more moisture and energy depletion from that second eye wall. So convection from that outer eye wall on the outside, the second one, is going to take away from the more moisture and convection in the inner eye wall in itself. So in general, the hurricane tropical cyclone activity typically peaks around September and October here. And what this is definitely indicating is that the ocean water temperatures are going to be warmer and more sustained throughout September and August. So we're seeing a lot more of a peak here generally with our hurricanes and tropical cyclones formations. So taking a wider look now at hurricanes and El Nino, typically with El Ninos we get warmer waters in the Pacific, when those warmer waters will influence definitely our winter weather, but also our hurricanes. In the Pacific here will be more hurricanes because it'll set them up with less vertical wind shear. While in the Atlantic here, we are going to be seeing fewer hurricanes based on greater stability and stronger vertical wind shear. So the atmosphere won't be as stable as we go throughout it, and it'll inhibit those tropical cyclones from forming. And we also were this year in a strong El Nino phase, and this is one of the more prevalent years in terms of hurricanes that we've seen in terms of those named storms during an El Nino year, since it's supposed to weaken the hurricane formations or the amount of hurricanes we could see. And the conditions are opposite during a La Nina, where we're going to see less hurricanes based on stronger vertical wind shear in the Pacific, and we also will see more hurricanes there into the Atlantic because of weaker vertical wind shear, and that creates a greater instability throughout our atmosphere too. It won't be as dry in there. So that La Ninas typically happen when the equatorial waters in the Pacific tend to be more cooler there, influencing our weather patterns too. So this is just a little bit of a small roundup that you can see with the Atlantic hurricane season. If you want to keep up to date with all the weather alerts you might be seeing this winter and through next year, download our KTC weather app.